Every Halloween for the past few years, I've been making videos about the relationship between the internet and horror niches. With every single niche I've brung up, there's been an aspect that always seems to show up. Video games. Gaming is probably the most important element whenever it comes to internet culture as a whole, especially when it comes to horror-related culture. I can't think of a single horror niche that doesn't come with its fair share of games that utilize that form of horror, or vice versa, aka games that utilize horror components popularized by the way the internet uses it. Liminal spaces, which are in like every single horror game, the uncanny valley, which is also used in like every horror game, and the use of older technology being a very common trope that you will see in about every damn horror game. No matter how many games use these tropes, they always seem to be loved, and I wanted to make a video about why that is and how it's implemented in the first place. Now, I've already talked about a ton of these horror games in other videos, so this time we'll just talk about the types of horror games that exist and that are popular on the internet and how they implement these internet horror tropes into them. Now, this is the most notorious form of horror whenever it comes to iconography, since they're like so much easier to market because of the fact that there's a face that people can stick with. I feel like we always get a viral one every year, with the most well-known being the animatronics in any of these FNAF games or clones. These games that feature mascot horror always tend to take something that's usually innocent and turn it into something demented, like the toys from Poppy's Playtime or the toon imagery from Bendy and the Ink Machine. Many of these games also feature you going through these dark abandoned places and feature scripted scenes that play out a story of some kind, with there being lore to keep you interested in more of these games coming out. That unfortunately leads to this major problem with how they tend to milk these games to death, since they are way more marketable than the average indie horror game. We end up getting fragmented pieces of an experience that ends up feeling derivative, since a lot of these games end up following the same formula, which is usually your character exploring some abandoned area in a linear way, since the game has scripted scenes that you have to endure first. The market nowadays is absolutely oversaturated and feels like they're made to be slop or lean into brain rot. FNAF and its clones was the previous proud champion of this genre before all of that, with its main gameplay of watching spooky things happen, with your only defense being what the game gives you at that very moment, until this other formula seeped in and zapped that mechanic right out of the franchise, forcing the games to follow what's more popular nowadays. Which is a damn shame, but hey, at least Glamrock Freddy is hot. Overall, people obsess over these games because of the iconic characters that follow the uncanny horror of turning something innocent into something evil, and you usually having to explore these dark, empty spaces that make them seem even scarier in context. Recently, this type of game really blew up these past couple of years, with a certain horror game to really ignite the fire going on in the genre, although this breed of horror games have already existed beforehand with games like Dead by Daylight, Dead Realm, Friday the 13th, etc., but it really exacerbated after Lethal Company's explosive growth. Happens to also be created by a furry, shout out Zeekers. I also wanted to mention that Phasmophobia walked so this game can run. This game depends on the usage of these dark liminal spaces that you have to explore with other players, where you have to fill a quota of objects to bring back to the ship in order to receive game currency that you can then use to make your next objective easier to fulfill. This is the one to really light the fire in the indie game market, as you see a ton of games that now follow this formula of people having to work together to explore an area with spooky things running around or miscellaneous obstacles to stop you. Not all of them being horror games, but definitely influenced by Lethal Company to a point where these games are now considered friend slop, which is very, very stupid, considering, mascot horror games are like the most oversaturated market that we've ever seen, but, that's all I gotta say about that term. The reason why these games are so popular is because of the marketability of you playing a game you and your friends can scream at. But the reason why Lethal Company and these other games really took off is because of its fun, simplistic design that makes it stand out more. Look at these games. They all have fun, wacky designs that attract eyeballs in a way that other multiplayer games like Phasmophobia couldn't. And they're just so genuinely fun to play with others, which leads to many viral clips that lead others to wanting that similar experience with their friends, with the added context of these games being very inexpensive. Because of the cute designs, it then tricks the player into a false sense of security before you absolutely terrify them with something uncanny that doesn't resemble the cute little design you just saw. Also, because of these games wanting to stand out, you get a variety of genre shakeups, like content warning taking the formula and adding a found footage aspect to it, with you needing to film everything that's going on, like with Outlast. Which reminds me, in many horror games, they usually let you have some sort of way to fight back, or some kind of element that allows you to have some sort of control with what's going on with your surroundings. Survival horror just straight up makes you fear for your life with how it limits your control. Some will take away a weapon or put an overpowered enemy that forces you to think outside the box rather than use the conventional solution of just blowing their brains out. Games like these always tend to go viral on the internet, with them honestly reigning supreme throughout the early 2010s with games like Slenderman and Amnesia: The Dark Descent. These games will usually give you an older piece of technology as to signify how fucked you are, like with Outlast giving you a camcorder with night vision as the only way to see through the dark, or Alien Isolation with this GPS telling you how close a xenomorph is with this loud beeping sound like it's coming from a digital alarm clock. The darkness and the fear of what could be in the unknown thrive so well in this genre because of the fact that you literally have no way to defend yourself. You feel trapped or overwhelmed by the horror surrounding you, leading to a lot of chase scenes, which could get very old very fast, but when done right, you get an all-time experience of paranoia that leads to many fun clips. Overall, a very goated genre that has been consistent and persistent since the very beginning. Okay, I consider this genre to be the most complex since they can broaden itself to other genres and act as that genre as a way to subvert expectations, which is the main gimmick of this genre. A game that tries its best to stand out by tricking you into thinking it's one thing, but actually ending up as a completely different thing by the end, with either the gameplay shifting or the story having some kind of twist. These games always come with visual hallucinations your character has that peels away at the reality in front of you, or an intricate lore that YouTubers will pick at for hours. I definitely feel like most, if not all, horror internet niches use an element of psychological horror, since it's always fun to scare the player by throwing random spooky stuff in a game that's already spooky, which means it's used more as a trope than an actual game genre, but there are definitely games that are way more psychological than others. Some of my favorites include RPG horror games, which always thrive off the psychological aspect, or something like Doki Doki Literature Club, that starts off as the most basic visual novel before it turns into something that resembles a genuine nightmare. Most of these games with this psychological aspect haven't mainly come from the deep themes or symbolic imagery that is present throughout the game that makes the player resonate deeply within the game, or feature a world that constantly shifts as the player tries to explore it. There are a ton of elements that these games tend to have, but it doesn't matter, because PT will forever be the game to represent this genre, as it's insanely influential in its legacy that was amplified by the cancellation and deletion of the game itself. The game, if you didn't already, had the atmosphere down to a T, with the gimmick of repeating rooms, with it slowly revealing more of itself, being so defined here that it's never been fully replicated. These games always tend to pop off here and there because of the heavy word of mouth or viral video that shows the game off. Many psychological horror games aren't really allowed to market their twist, since, it would ruin the experience, so they kind of depend off of other people's reactions and how it tells other people that they must experience this without them knowing the full extent of the horror. The uncanniness of what shows up is where the horror mainly comes from. Like, you play a game like this expecting it to continue until the game says psych and then spooks you in a completely different way that you would have never expected. Overall, there are so many other games that utilize internet horror niches or just big in general that I personally just didn't have enough time to talk about. But it'll be interesting to see how this medium evolves as certain genres pop up or die off from oversaturation. Either way, I hope you enjoyed my little Halloween special. I actually have like a genuine, fun, big spooky video that was planned, and it's currently on the way, but I got sick. I don't know if you can tell by my voice, I got very sick and I couldn't quite finish it, but I hope to get it done soon. I'm also still working on my 1,000 subscriber special. That'll probably come out at some point this year. Thank you for watching. Thank you for watching. Happy Halloween.